John Kennedy storms off The View after fiery showdown with Joy Behar. The studio lights of The View blazed down on the familiar round table, casting a warm glow over the set as the audience buzzed with anticipation. The show's signature theme, music faded, and the hosts Joy Behar, Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and Sunoni Holston settled into their seats, ready to welcome their next guest. Today's lineup promised something different, not a Hollywood star or a pop sensation, but a seasoned politician, Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana. Known for his folksy charm and sharp wit, Kennedy was no stranger to the public eye. But this was his first time stepping into the daytime talk show arena. He'd agreed to appear to discuss a new community initiative in his home state, a project aimed at revitalizing small towns through education and job training. It was the kind of feel-good topic that seemed tailor-made for morning television, a chance to share a positive message with a national audience. Backstage, Kennedy's team had prepped him thoroughly. Keep it light, focus on the initiative, and expect a few playful jabs from the hosts. After all, The View was known for its lively debates, but nothing he couldn't handle. As he adjusted his tie and stepped toward the stage, Kennedy felt a familiar calm, the same steadiness that had carried him through countless debates and town halls. This was just another conversation, another chance to connect. Little did he know, the next 10 minutes would be anything but routine. The audience erupted in applause as Kennedy emerged waving with a warm smile. He wore a crisp navy suit, his silver hair neatly combed, and his eyes twinkled with the easy confidence of a man who'd spent decades in the public square. He shook hands with each host, exchanging pleasantries before settling into the guest chair. The set was bright and inviting with its colorful backdrop and the hosts' coffee mugs lined up like props in a cozy living room. Whoopi kicked things off with a welcoming tone, introducing Kennedy and his initiative. "Senator, we are thrilled to have you here to talk about this incredible work you're doing in Louisiana," she said, her voice genuine. "Tell us about this project, and what it means for the folks back home." Kennedy leaned forward, his draw as smooth as molasses. "Well, Whoopi, I'm just a country boy trying to do some good. This initiative is about giving small towns a leg up, better schools, job training, and a chance for folks to build a future without leaving their roots behind. It's about hope, plain and simple." The audience clapped, and for a moment the atmosphere felt like a warm handshake. Sarah Haynes chimed in with a follow-up about how the program was funded, and Kennedy answered with a mix of humor and detail, tossing in a quip about pinching pennies tighter than my grandmama at a yard sale. The crowd chuckled, and even Sonny Holland cracked a smile. Everything was going according to plan. Then Joy Behar leaned forward, her signature smirk curling at the edges. Well, Senator Kennedy," she began, her tone dripping with something sharper than curiosity. "This all sounds very noble, but let's be real here. Isn't this just another politician's pet project to make you look good for the cameras? I mean, how much of this is actually about helping people, and how much is just you polishing your image?" The words landed like a pebble in a still pond, sending ripples through the studio. The audience's laughter faded into an awkward murmur, and the other hosts shifted in their seats. Kennedy's smile didn't waver, but his eyes narrowed slightly, registering the shift in tone. His team, standing just off camera, exchanged uneasy glances. They'd warned him about Behar's tendency to push buttons, but this felt like more than a playful jab. It felt like a challenge. Kennedy tilted his head, his voice steady as he responded, "Joy, I reckon you're entitled to your skepticism, but this ain't about me shining for the cameras. It's about folks in places like Ruston and Nashua who need a hand up. We've got real plans, real money, and real people working to make it happen. You're welcome to come down to Louisiana and see it for yourself." His tone was polite but firm, an invitation wrapped in a subtle rebuke. Behar wasn't buying it. She leaned back, crossing her arms, her smirk growing wider. "Oh, come on, Senator. You've been in politics for how long? You know how this game works. You slap your name on a feel-good project, get some headlines, and call it a day. I'm just saying, the folks watching at home aren't as gullible as you might think." The audience let out a few nervous laughs, unsure whether to side with Behar's bluntness or Kennedy's earnestness. Whoopi tried to steer the conversation back, interjecting with a question about the initiative's timeline, but Behar cut her off. Her eyes locked on Kennedy. No, let's not dodge this. "Senator, you've got a reputation for these folksy one-liners, but is that all there is? Are you just playing the AW shucks card to distract from the fact that this is just another photo op?" The air in the studio grew heavy, the warmth of the opening moments replaced by a palpable tension. Kennedy's team whispered frantically backstage, one aide muttering about whether they should signal the producers to intervene. But Kennedy didn't flinch. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his gaze fixed on Behar Joy. "I'm going to level with you," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "I've been called a lot of things in my time, some true, some not, but I didn't come here to play games or dodge questions. I came to talk about something that matters to real people, not to spar with someone looking for a gotcha moment. If you've got a problem with me, that's fine. But let's not pretend this is about the folks I'm trying to help." The audience clapped a few, even cheering, sensing Kennedy's sincerity. But Behar wasn't backing down. She tilted her head, her voice taking on a mocking edge. "Oh, please, Senator, spare us the noble act. You're a politician. Your whole job is to sell a story. And this helping real people bit, it's just another chapter in the John Kennedy playbook. I'm just calling it like I see it." The words stung, not because they were true, but because they were delivered with such relish, as if Behar was enjoying the chance to poke holes in Kennedy's carefully crafted image. Sarah Haynes jumped in her voice, bright but strained. "Okay, let's take a step back. Senator, maybe you can tell us more about how this initiative will actually work on the ground." It was a lifeline, a chance to reset the conversation. But Behar waved her off her focus, unrelenting. "Hold on, Sarah, I'm not done," Behar said, her eyes glinting with determination. "Senator, you talk a big game about helping small towns, but isn't it convenient that this comes up right when you're facing some tough questions back home? I mean, people are talking about your record, and this feels like a distraction. Am I wrong?" The question hung in the air, sharp and accusatory. The audience grew quiet, sensing the interview veering into uncharted territory. This wasn't the lighthearted banter they'd tuned in for. It was a confrontation, and it was escalating fast. Kennedy's jaw tightened, and for the first time, a flicker of frustration crossed his face. He'd faced tough opponents before, from debate stages to Senate hearings. But this felt different. Behar wasn't just challenging his ideas. She was questioning his character, and doing it with a smirk that suggested she was enjoying every second. His team, now visibly anxious, signaled to the producers, but the control booth seemed frozen, unsure whether to let the drama unfold or cut to commercial. Kennedy took a slow breath, his fingers tapping lightly on the arm of his chair, a subtle sign of the storm brewing beneath his calm exterior. "Joe, I'm not sure what you're trying to get at," he said, his voice measured, but carrying an edge. "But if you're implying that I'm doing this for some kind of political points, you're barking up the wrong tree. I've spent my career fighting for folks who don't have a voice, and this initiative ain't no different. You want to talk about my record? Fine, let's talk. But don't sit there and act like you know what's in my heart or what drives me to get up every morning." The audience erupted in applause, louder this time, emboldened by Kennedy's defiance. But Behar was undeterred. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "Oh, Senator, I don't need to know what's in your heart. I've seen enough politicians to know how this works. You're not fooling anybody with this man of the people routine. It's a tired act, and I'm just wondering when you're going to try something." Knew the words were like a slap, and the studio fell silent. The tension so thick you could feel it in the air. Whoopi tried again to intervene, her voice urgent. "All right, let's keep this respectful, folks. Senator, maybe you can share a specific example of how this initiative has helped someone." But her words were drowned out by the weight of the moment. Kennedy's eyes locked onto Behar's, and for a brief second, the folksy charm that defined him gave way to something harder, more resolute. "Joy, I came here to talk about something that could change lives," he said, his voice slow and deliberate. "I didn't come here to be your punching bag. You want to have a real conversation. I'm all ears. But if you're just looking to tear me down for a few laughs, I'm not sure I'm the right guest for you." The audience gasped, a few clapping in support, while others whispered to their neighbors, unsure how to react. Behar's smirk faltered for a moment, caught off guard by Kennedy's directness, but she quickly recovered, leaning back with a theatrical sigh. "Oh, Senator, don't get so sensitive. I'm just asking the questions people want answers to. If you can't handle a little pushback, maybe you're not cut out for this." The jab was meant to provoke, and it did. Kennedy's fingers stopped tapping, and his posture stiffened, a clear sign that he was done playing nice. The other hosts exchanged worried glances, realizing the interview was spiraling out of control, while the producers in the control booth debated whether to let the chaos play out for ratings or pull the plug before things got worse. As the segment neared its end, the tension in the studio was palpable, like the air before a thunderstorm. Kennedy had come prepared for a friendly chat, but Behar's relentless prodding had turned it into something else entirely, a test of wills, a clash of personalities that was anything but routine. The audience, now fully invested, leaned forward in their seats, sensing that this was only the beginning of something bigger. Kennedy's team, meanwhile, was in full damage control mode, whispering about how to handle the fallout if things got uglier. But Kennedy himself seemed unfazed, his gaze steady, his resolve unbroken. He'd faced tougher fights than this, and he wasn't about to let Joy Behar get the better of him. As the cameras panned across the set, capturing the uneasy smiles of the hosts and the riveted expressions of the audience, one thing was clear: this was no ordinary episode of The View. It was the start of a confrontation that would leave everyone talking, a moment that would set the stage for an unforgettable showdown. The studio of The View pulsed with a restless energy as the second segment kicked off. The audience still reeling from the sharp opening clash between Senator John Kennedy and Joy Behar. The bright lights cast long shadows across the round table, where the hosts Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, Sononi Holin, and Behar sat in a facade of composure. Whoopi clutched her note cards a little too tightly. Sarah's smile was strained, and Sonny's expression was a mask of neutrality. Kennedy in the guest chair looked every bit the seasoned senator, navy suit pressed, silver hair gleaming, but his eyes held a glint of steel, a sign he was ready for whatever came next. His team station just off stage whispered urgently, their phones buzzing with notifications as clips of the first segment began to spread online. The producers in the control booth, sensing a rating spike, opted to let the tension play out, their headsets alive with debates about whether to intervene. What was meant to be a straightforward discussion about Kennedy's Louisiana Community Initiative, a plan to bring job training and education to small towns, had veered into a verbal sparring match, and the audience leaned forward, hungry for the next move. Whoopi, trying to steer the ship back on course, opened with a cautious tone. "We're back with Senator John Kennedy talking about his work in Louisiana," she said, her voice warm but wary. "Senator, let's dig into the nuts and bolts of this initiative. How's it actually helping people on the ground?" It was a chance for Kennedy to refocus, and he seized it, leaning forward with his signature draw. "Well, Whoopi, it's about giving folks a ladder, not a handout in towns like Minden. We're funding programs that teach skills, welding, coding, nursing, so people can work and stay where their roots are. I met a fellow last week, used to drive trucks. Now he's fixing wind turbines, making twice what he did before. That's the kind of change we're after." The audience clapped, drawn to the story's grit, and Sarah Haynes jumped in her tone, eager. "That's powerful. Senator, how do you make sure these programs reach everyone who needs them?" Kennedy began to answer, detailing outreach efforts with a mix of humor and heart, tossing in a quip about hunting for talent. "Like my uncle used to hunt quail quietly, but with purpose." The crowd chuckled, and for a moment the mood lightened, but Joy Behar wasn't ready to let the conversation settle. She leaned forward, her smirk sharp as a blade. "Hold up, Senator, let's not get too cozy with these stories," she said, her voice laced with skepticism. "You're making it sound like you've cracked the code, but you've been in the Senate for years. Isn't this just more of the same? I mean, where's the big idea? Are you really changing lives, or just putting a shiny new label on old policies?" The audience murmured, some nodding, others tensing as the jab landed. The question wasn't just about the initiative. It was a challenge to Kennedy's entire approach, a suggestion that he was coasting on charm rather than substance. His team, watching from the sidelines, stiffened, one aide muttering, "She's going for blood." Kennedy's smile didn't waver, but his fingers tapped briefly on the arm of his chair, a flicker of irritation betraying his calm. "Joy, I reckon you're looking for a headline, not an answer," he said, his tone steady but pointed. "This ain't about reinventing the wheel, it's about what works. We're taking ideas that have proven themselves and putting them where they're needed most. You want to call that old? I call it getting the job done." The audience clapped, a few cheering, emboldened by his pushback. Behar, undeterred, leaned back, crossing her arms. "Getting the job done? Senator, come on. You're known for these folksy zingers, but that's not leadership, it's a performance. People want fresh solutions, not the same tired playbook dressed up with a southern accent." The words stung sharp and personal, reducing Kennedy's persona to a caricature. The studio grew quiet, the tension coiling like a spring. Whoopi tried to intervene, her voice firm. "Okay, Joy, let's stay on the initiative." But Behar waved her off, her eyes locked on Kennedy. "No, Whoopi, I'm asking what's on everyone's mind. Senator, when's the last time you took a real swing at something bold? Or are you just riding the same horse you've always ridden?" The audience gasped, sensing the interview tipping into dangerous territory. Kennedy's team signaled the producers, but the control booth was a mess of indecision. Some saw drama, others disaster. Kennedy's jaw tightened his draw, taking on a harder edge. "Joy, I don't know what burrs under your saddle, but you're way off," he said. "I've spent my career fighting for folks who don't have a voice, and this initiative ain't a performance. It's real work for real people. You want to talk bold? Bold is betting on small towns when everyone else has written them off." The crowd roared, clapping and cheering, some standing in support. Behar's smirk widened, her voice dropping to a mocking tone. "Betting on small-town senator. That's not bold, that's safe. You're playing to your crowd, sticking to what's easy. People are tired of politicians who lean on charm instead of vision. When are you going to step up with something that actually shakes things up?" The accusation was a gut punch, and the studio fell silent, the weight of her words hanging heavy. Sononi Hen tried to pivot, asking about the initiative's funding, but her voice was lost in the clash. Kennedy leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Joy, you're entitled to your view, but don't act like you know what drives me," he said, his voice low and intense. "I answer to the people of Louisiana, folks who work hard, raise kids, and don't have time for the kind of sparring you're trying to start. You want to talk vision. My vision is a state where every town has a shot, not just the ones on a TV screen. That's what I'm fighting for, not your applause. The audience erupted, their cheers deafening as Kennedy's words cut through Behar's attack. Behar, her face flushing, doubled down. Oh, please, Senator, you're not fighting for Louisiana. You're fighting for your image, this aw shucks routine. It's a brand, and it's getting old. People want leaders who innovate, not ones who recycle the same lines to dodge the hard stuff. The studio grew quiet again. The audience split between shock and anticipation. Kennedy's fingers stopped tapping, his posture stiffening. Joy, I came here to talk about helping folks, not to be your punching bag, he said, his voice rising slightly. But since you keep pushing, let me ask you something. When's the last time you used this show to do more than stir up trouble? When's the last time you talked about solutions instead of slinging insults? That's the real dodge here. The audience gasped, then cheered a few, shouting, "That's right." As Kennedy turned the tables, Behar's smirk faltered, her eyes flashing with anger. "Don't flip this on me, Senator," she snapped. "I'm holding you accountable, and if you can't handle it, maybe you're not cut out for the spotlight." The jab was desperate, and the crowd's reaction, a mix of boos and cheers, only fueled the chaos. Kennedy shook his head, a chuckle escaping. Accountability, Joy. That's a funny word coming from someone who'd rather make a scene than have a real talk. He said, "I'm here for the folks who need help, not for your ratings. You want to hold someone accountable? Start with yourself." The studio exploded, the audience on its feet, clapping and shouting as the segment neared its end. Behar opened her mouth to retort, but Whoopi cut in, her voice urgent. "All right, we're going to take a quick break." The cameras panned across the set, capturing the stunned hosts and the electrified crowd. The tension, a living thing. Kennedy sat back, his face calm, but his eyes fierce, ready for the next round. His team, now bracing for a media storm, knew this was no ordinary interview. It was a defining moment, and the fight was far from over. The studio of The View was a pressure cooker. As the third segment began, the air charged with the raw energy of a confrontation that had spiraled far beyond anyone's expectations. The audience, no longer just spectators, leaned forward, their whispers, a tense undercurrent, to the show's theme music fading out. The round table was a battlefield of strained expressions. Whoopi Goldberg gripped her note cards, her usual calm frame. Sarah Haynes forced a nervous smile, her eyes darting between the combatants. And Sunny Holland sat rigid, her silence louder than words. Senator John Kennedy, still in the guest chair, looked like a man who'd weathered storms but was bracing for a hurricane. His navy suit remained impeccable, his silver hair catching the studio lights, but his jaw was set, his eyes burning with a quiet fury that hadn't been there at the start. His team, huddled backstage, was in full crisis mode, their phones buzzing, with alerts about the interview clips going viral on social media. The producers in the control booth, torn between the chaos and the ratings. Bonanza had chosen to let the segment roll their headsets, crackling with frantic debates. What had begun as a routine appearance to promote Kennedy's Louisiana Community Initiative, a plan to boost small towns with job training, and education, had become a public showdown with Joy Behar, and the tension was about to reach its breaking point. Whoopi, desperate to regain control, opened the segment with a strained chuckle. "All right, we're back with Senator John Kennedy, and things have gotten a little heated," she said, her voice a mix of caution and exasperation. "Senator, let's try to focus on your initiative again. Can you share how you're measuring success for these programs?" It was a lifeline, a chance to pull the conversation back to safer ground. Kennedy nodded, his draw deliberate as he began. "Sure thing, Whoopi. We're tracking things like job placement rates, how many folks finish our training programs, and how many kids stay in school because of better resources. In places like Monroe, we've seen a 20% uptick in employment for our trainees. That's real progress, not just numbers." The audience clapped, a few nodding in approval, and for a fleeting moment, it seemed the interview might find its way back to civility. Sunny Holland leaned in, her tone measured. "That's impressive, Senator. How do you ensure these programs reach the most underserved communities?" Kennedy began to answer, outlining outreach efforts with a calm clarity, his folksy charm resurfacing, as he mentioned knocking on doors like a traveling salesman with a suitcase full of hope. But Joy Behar wasn't ready to let the moment pass. She cut in, her voice sharp and unrelenting, her smirk replaced by a steely glare. "Oh, come on, Senator. Let's not pretend this is some grand victory," she said, her words dripping with disdain. "Uptick. That's a drop in the bucket for a state like Louisiana, and you've been at this long enough to know it. Isn't it time you admitted that your ideas are just outdated? That you're a relic who's out of touch with what people really need?" The audience gasped the accusation, landing like a thunderclap. The jab wasn't just about the initiative, it was a direct attack on Kennedy's relevance. His entire career, reduced to a single cutting-word relic. His team, watching from the wings, went pale. One aide muttering, "She's gone too far." The other hosts froze their eyes wide as the studio grew so quiet you could hear the hum of the cameras. Kennedy's hand, which had been resting lightly on the arm of his chair, clenched into a fist, his knuckles whitening. His face remained composed, but the fire in his eyes was unmistakable. This wasn't just a challenge, it was personal joy. "I've been patient," Kennedy said, his voice low and steady, each word measured like a judge delivering a verdict. "I came here to talk about helping folks, not to be your piñata. But since you want to make this about me, let's get something straight. I've spent my life working for people who don't have the luxury of sitting in a fancy studio throwing insults for applause. You call me a relic. Fine. But this relic is out there every day fighting for families who need a chance while you're up here playing games with words to make yourself feel clever." The audience erupted cheers and applause, filling the studio, a few standing in support. Behar's face flushed, but she doubled down, leaning forward with a defiant glare. "Clever, Senator. I'm just telling the truth. People are tired of politicians like you trotting out the same old promises with nothing new to show for it. You're not a hero. You're just another guy clinging to a job that's passed you by." The words were venomous, and the audience's cheers turned to murmurs as some shocked by her audacity, others unsure how to react. Kennedy leaned forward, his eyes locked on Behar's, his jaw taking on a razor's edge. "Joy, you don't know the first thing about the people I serve or the work I do," he said, his voice rising for the first time. "You sit here hiding behind that table, acting like you're speaking for the folks at home. But all you're doing is tearing down anyone who dares to try something different. You want to talk about outdated? How about a talk show that thrives on making people feel small instead of lifting them up? That's the real relic here." The studio roared, the audience clapping wildly, some shouting, "Go, Senator!" As Kennedy's words hit their mark, Behar's smirk vanished, her face weening as she scrambled for a comeback. "Don't you dare lecture me about this show," she snapped, her voice trembling with anger. "We're here asking the tough questions, holding people like you accountable. If you can't take the heat, maybe you shouldn't be in the kitchen." The cliché fell flat, and the audience's reaction, a mix of boos and scattered applause, only heightened the chaos. Sarah Haynes tried to intervene, her voice shaky. "Okay, let's all take a breath and maybe talk about," but Behar cut her off, her eyes still fixed on Kennedy. "No, Sarah, I'm not done. Senator, you act like you're above criticism, but you're not. People see through this man of the people act, and they're not buying it anymore." Kennedy shook his head, a bitter chuckle escaping his lips. "Joy, the only thing folks see through is your need to turn every conversation into a fight," he said, his voice calm but cutting. "I came here to talk about hope, about giving people a future. But you're so busy trying to win a debate, you forgot what it means to have a real conversation." The audience clapped again, their support for Kennedy growing louder. But Behar wasn't backing down. She pointed a finger at him, her voice rising to a near shout. "A real conversation, Senator. A real conversation means facing the truth. And the truth is, your time's up. You're not leading. You're just hanging on." The words were a dagger, and for a moment, Kennedy's face flickered with something raw. A flash of hurt quickly replaced by resolve. He stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the silent studio. "I've had enough," Kennedy said, his voice quiet, but carrying the weight of finality. "I came here to talk about something that matters, not to be insulted by someone who thinks cruelty is entertainment. You want to call me outdated? Go ahead. But I'm not going to sit here and let you disrespect the people I serve or the work we're doing. This ain't a conversation, it's an ambush. And I'm done playing your game." The audience gasped, then erupted in applause, many standing as Kennedy adjusted his suit jacket, his posture tall and unyielding. Behar's face went pale, her mouth opening to respond, but Kennedy held up a hand, silencing her. "I'm not finished," he said, his eyes blazing. "You've got a platform, Joy, and you could use it to do good, to inspire folks. Instead, you choose to tear people down because it's easier than building something yourself. That's not accountability. That's just mean, and I'm not here for it." The studio was electric, the audience cheering wildly as Kennedy's words reverberated. He turned, taking a step toward the edge of the stage, then paused, looking back at the round table. "I came here out of respect for this show and its audience," he said, his voice steady. "But respect goes both ways, and I'm not feeling it here today, so I'm leaving. Not because I can't handle tough questions, but because I've got better things to do than argue with someone who'd rather fight than listen." With that, Kennedy walked off the set, his strides deliberate, his head held high. The audience roared, a mix of cheers and stunned gasps, while Behar sat frozen, her face a mask of shock and fury. Whoopi scrambled to fill the silence, stammering, We'll be right back after this break." As the cameras panned to the stunned hosts and the chaotic energy of the studio, the producers, now in full panic, signaled for a commercial, but the damage was done. Kennedy's exit wasn't just a moment. It was a statement, one that would echo far beyond the soundstage. As the lights dimmed and the audience buzzed, it was clear this showdown had reached its peak, leaving everyone to wonder what would come. Next, the studio lights dimmed as the view cut to commercial. But the electric charge lingered, crackling through the audience like static after a lightning strike. Senator John Kennedy's dramatic exit had left the set in disarray. Joy Behar sat rigid, her face flushed with a mix of rage and humiliation. Whoopi Goldberg scrambled to regain control, muttering to the producers through her earpiece. Sarah Haynes and Sonny Holland exchanged stunned glances, their coffee mugs untouched, forgotten props in a scene gone horribly off-script. The audience buzzed, some whispering in shock, others applauding Kennedy's stand, their phones already lighting up with clips of the showdown spreading across social media. Backstage, Kennedy's team was a whirlwind of activity, fielding calls from reporters and strategizing how to handle the fallout. The producers in the control booth, caught between panic and the thrill of viral content, debated whether to bring Behar back for a rebuttal or pivot to the next segment. What had started as a routine interview about Kennedy's Louisiana Community Initiative, a plan to revitalize small towns through education and job training, had become a cultural flashpoint, a clash that exposed raw truths about respect, confrontation, and the power of public platforms. As the show resumed, the question wasn't just what happened next, but what it all meant. Whoopi, her voice strained, but professional, addressed the camera as the segment returned. "Well, folks, that was something," she said, forcing a chuckle. "We're going to move on, but we thank Senator Kennedy for joining us today." The audience murmured some clapping, others still processing the chaos. Behar, visibly shaken, tried to reclaim her footing. "Look, I was just asking tough questions," she said, her tone defensive. "That's what we do here. If he can't handle it, that's on him." The words fell flat, met with scattered applause and a few boos. The crowd divided. Sarah Haynes jumped in, her voice overly bright. "Let's talk about what the senator's initiative could mean for communities, because that's important." But the attempt to redirect felt hollow, the energy of Kennedy's walk-off too potent to ignore. Off camera, the producers decided to cut the segment short, transitioning to a lighter topic about celebrity news, but the damage was done. Clips of the confrontation were already trending online with hashtags like #KenBehar and #TheViewShowdown racking up millions of views. Pundits and fans alike dissected the exchange, some praising Kennedy for standing up to Behar's provocations, others criticizing him for abandoning the conversation, and many questioning Behar's aggressive approach. In the days that followed, the incident became a lightning rod for broader discussions about civility in public discourse. Kennedy, ever the strategist, chose his next move carefully. In a radio interview back in Louisiana, he addressed the clash. With his trademark.com, his draw steady as he spoke to a local host. "I didn't go on that show looking for a fight," he said, leaning into the microphone. "I went to talk about helping folks in places like Shreveport and Lake Charles, giving them a shot at a better life. But when someone's more interested in tearing you down than listening, there comes a point where you got to say enough. I walked off because I respect myself and I respect the people I serve too much to play that game." The audience, listening from their homes and cars across the state, nodded along, many seeing his exit not as a retreat but as a stand for dignity. Kennedy went on, his voice softening. "I don't hold a grudge. I hope folks at that show, and folks watching at home, think about how we talk to each other. We can disagree without being disagreeable. That's how we move forward." The interview, syndicated nationally, struck a chord, earning praise for its measured tone and reinforcing Kennedy's image as a principled everyman. Behar, meanwhile, faced a storm of scrutiny. Social media was unforgiving, with some viewers calling her questions fair, but others branding her approach as bullying. In a later episode of The View, she addressed the incident, her tone a mix of defiance and contrition. "I'm not here to make people feel small," she said, her hands clasped tightly, "but I'm going to ask the hard questions, and sometimes that ruffles feathers. Maybe I pushed too far, but that's the job." The apology, if it could be called that, did little to quell the backlash, and the show's ratings took a hit as some viewers tuned out in protest. Behind the scenes, the producers grappled with how to handle the fallout, issuing a statement about their commitment to robust dialogue while privately urging Behar to soften her approach in future interviews. The other hosts, caught in the crossfire, remained diplomatic, with Whoopi later telling a reporter, "It was a tough day, but we learn and move on." Yet the incident lingered, a case study in how quickly a conversation can derail when respect is sidelined. The broader lesson of the showdown began to crystallize in the public's mind, fueled by op-eds, podcasts, and coffee shop debates. Kennedy's walk-off wasn't just about one heated moment. It was a reminder that words carry weight, and how we wield them shapes not just our relationships but the world around us. For every viewer who cheered Kennedy's defiance, there was another, who saw Behar's questions as a necessary challenge, sparking a deeper question. Where's the line between accountability and antagonism? Kennedy, reflecting on this in a later speech to a Louisiana community group, put it simply. Folks, we don't have to agree on everything, but we've got to treat each other like human beings. You can't build nothing good, whether it's a family, a town, or a country, on a foundation of meanness. His words, delivered with the same folksy sincerity that had defined his career, resonated. Turning the incident into a teachable moment, he urged the crowd to think about their own interactions, to choose dialogue over destruction, even when tempers flare. The educational takeaway was clear: respect isn't just a courtesy, it's a cornerstone of meaningful communication. Kennedy's decision to leave, while dramatic, underscored the power of setting boundaries when faced with hostility. Yet his restraint, both during the clash and in its aftermath, showed that standing up for oneself doesn't require stooping to the same level. For viewers, especially younger ones watching the clips online, the incident offered a lesson in handling conflict. Stay true to your values, focus on the issue, and know when to walk away from a fight that serves no purpose. It also highlighted the responsibility of those with platforms, whether a senator or a talk show host, to use their influence to build up, not tear down. As the dust settled, the showdown became less about who won and more about what it taught. That in a world quick to divide, choosing respect over rancor is a radical act, one that starts with each of us. The story of Kennedy and Behar faded from the headlines, but its impact lingered, a reminder of the fragile line between debate and destruction. Kennedy returned to his work in Louisiana, his initiative gaining new attention thanks to the publicity, with towns like Alexandria reporting increased enrollment in training programs. Behar and The View moved on, their format unchanged, but their approach tempered, at least for a while. For the audience, both in the studio and at home, the clash was a mirror reflecting how we choose to engage with one another. It wasn't about politics or personalities. It was about humanity and the simple truth that we are all better off when we listen, learn, and lift each other up. As Kennedy had said, hope is what moves us forward, and hope begins with respect, one conversation at a time.